right. Let's see. Now we're on episode 4, right? Something like that. This is the second part of the two-parter.
Episode 4, part 2 of episode 3.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So welcome back. This is the M&M podcast with your hosts Michelle
and Martin.
Let's see. We started off. We ended last time with the idea on storytelling and the way that you can use the different ways of storytelling. And what I used was, I forget what I used in the first place, but what I was going to go to is basically how you can use LARPing.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the uninformed, actually, do you know what LARPing is?
No, it sounds like someone pronouncing rapping wrong.
No, it's not.
L.
It is not mispronounced rapping. It is live action role playing.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a place. Have you heard of role playing games? Actually, we'll start there.
The start of Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
That's the game the kids are playing.
Yeah.
And perhaps what I used to see it a bit in Dexter's Lab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some of the episodes they used to, and because it's a cartoon, it used to be quite immersive.
Yeah.
And they animate everything and they act out whatever they're playing.
Yes. Yeah.
Near the end, the scene cuts back to them just throwing cards and.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in Stranger Things, they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is your quintessential role playing game. And in these types of games, not limited to knights in shining armor and magic and whatnot, and also in live action role playing, you get to basically you play a character in a system of rules that's supposed to convey some sort of feeling of that time period or whatever you're trying to portray. So there's high fantasy LARP, so people dress up as elves and orcs and wizards. And they all have these like second lives of politics and intrigue and wars and battles and whatnot. And there's certain rules that they set so that you can play the role and you can play the game. Same with tabletop role playing. You build a character in a specific world, and the narrator of the story, the dungeon master, or the game master, the GM, will basically fabricate a story that is based on their experiences and the game system, so that they can give certain things to entertain the people around the table. This is in many respects it's a way of storytelling that is immersive. A lot of people talk about the experiences that they have within either LARPing and or role-playing games as things that they have done, even though they never did them. It's not like they're losing their personality, so to say. I never at one point was saying that I am Jace Moonshadow, the knight of basically the person who wants to become a knight. Mm-hmm. Instead, I talk about those experiences as if they actually happened. So what I would say is, for example, did you know, Martin, that I defended one side of a castle wall for about an hour straight by myself? I had a few people to help, but I was basically the only one there. See? Mm-hmm. I experienced that because I actually played it. And so that type of storytelling can be really, really good in terms of getting people into a mindset or into a way of thinking about certain subjects or certain ideas, and also encourages group work and teamwork if you're working with multiple people.
So what you're saying is, as opposed to the view that was largely prevalent in the 90s about games teaching kids to be violent, you're saying that such games that involve action, mm-hmm. adventure and whatnot actually have more of life lessons than training you to be a highly skilled assassin.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to achieve and what the system allows you to do, right? Because certain systems allow you to do certain things. But you can build a world or a place where people can cooperate together, can learn teamwork, can do all sorts of things, be entertained, and also definitely learn something out of it. And sometimes if it's the live action stuff, you actually learn how to fight, and and what you do is you learn certain rules of respect and honor. You learn you basically train your body so that you're faster and stronger, and that you're more precise. These are things that you can apply in real life that are not necessarily relayed to being a knight in shining armor. But I mean, where does that lead us? I mean, it's basically a way of interactive storytelling that, in all honesty, is very Western based in origin. At least for the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, and LARPing. A lot of that stuff is done in like medieval reenactments and whatnot. That's a lot of that focus is in Germany, actually, Copenhagen, Denmark. There's a fair amount of that stuff in the UK. There's plenty of that stuff in the United States, because of a lot of people, of course, are immigrants from those places that kind of brought that.
Came with the stories.
Right, they came with the stories, they came with that type of history and want to reenact it because they're not actually in the place where it's held.
And speaking of the story, there's something that crossed my mind in the previous episode about who tells the story best or whose story is most trusted. Right now today we have Google, we have YouTube, we have Wikipedia. Whenever you have an argument with someone, you're gonna settle it on, let's Google that. Let's check out let's check on what the Wikipedia article says. And these are really great resources for learning. They're great resources for conveying information, mostly from a consumer side. From a producer side as well, whereby you get to put your information out there. But if your main aim is to just learn and fill your mind with new stuff, new things you did not know before, you'd go to, in this day and age, you're likely to Google it. Whether you use Bing or Dogpile or any other of those search engines.
Yeah. And
I was wondering about the issue of their neutrality. The neutrality of such platforms. Whether it's Google, it's really trusted on one hand. There's something like Wikipedia, which I use a lot, but all my professors discourage it.
Right.
Do not quote Wikipedia. It's not an academic source.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of really valuable information.
Yeah.
But information that can be changed by anybody.
Right.
And that's a big change from the past, when most of the information that was widely available was done in very structured ways, in a more formal pattern, whether it was textbooks, magazines, on radio, on TV.
Yeah.
You had to be you had to be trained, you had to be connected, you had to have a specific set of skills for you to teach on these platforms. Because as education moved from slates to chalkboards to books to the internet, and my mind just went on a proper rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I mean, it's funny that you mentioned like rabbit holes though, in terms of information, because I mean, we can get lost in our own minds, but it's even easier to get lost on the internet in those rabbit holes of different places like YouTube, right?
Tell me about it. You start reading about slavery, and 30 minutes later you're reading The Secrets of Beauty. 1 hour later you're on a page talking about what is life. And so on and so forth. And it's, for me, I call them my online adventures, whereby for Wikipedia it will keep suggesting for you could click on this link and learn more about this, and learn more about this. And on YouTube it's even crazier. It kind of tries to figure out the kind of person you are and the kind of things you're into based on what you watch and what you search and what people who search similar things also watch. Like I remember I was reading about, I was watching something on health or just general health. 30 minutes later I was watching videos by this lady called Dr. Pimple Popper. And all she does is
Yeah,
She's a dermatologist by profession. Have you watched her?
no, I haven't watched her. You've told me about this,
Yeah.
and please,
And she does it for the education value.
Okay, all right.
Though the people who watch it say it's oddly satisfying. For her, she does it and she says it's strictly from an academic perspective. And don't just take this as entertainment.
Yeah, entertainment is one way to put it. But all right, so to bring back the idea, right, is let's take it from the viewpoint of like the actual information that you're getting from Wikipedia. It's people who are inputting their information to Wikipedia to improve it and to make it quote unquote better, because it gives you more sources, it gives you more reliability in this sense. And that's the way that, at least in that system, you trust people in terms of what sources and what ideas they're trying to portray. If we relate back to the role-playing games, the ideas and values that you're trying to portray through those games are done by the actual people that are organizing the game through the system's mechanics, which, of course, are, as we already mentioned, is very Western-based and would be fascinating to see if we were to do a role-playing game version in, I don't know, Kenya or just any other place that is not a typical Western place. But then we get into the conversation of, okay, these two sources, like different games or different roles or different websites are giving you information. But I mean, the biggest source of information that we have nowadays, of course, is the general media.
True. And back to the media and how neutral they are.
Neutral. That's a funny term about media here.
Yeah. How neutral they are. How neutral we as the viewers or the consumers of the information think they're supposed to be, because we think they're supposed to take a neutral position. Right now, the US is having their elections, and
oh yeah.
In theory, people expect that all media organizations should be neutral and objective and give people the true story. But on the other hand, these organizations are owned by humans. These organizations are businesses, and
yes,
in as much as they're supposed to be neutral, what happens to things like personal values that someone has? What happens to do you just put them aside and decide and only talk about half the story?
Right.
I won't let myself be really involved in it.
Right.
And what's the good in that, and what are the dangers in that? The good in that is there might be more representation, in that there's minimal bias. But on the contrary, it will mean that there'll be too much of conforming, and everybody's the population will basically be turned into robots, because you get information from this source and it has to be politically correct in a certain way. It's not supposed to lean too much towards religion, too much towards the issues of race, too much towards the issues of so many different things.
Right. You have to be perfect, which is impossible.
Which is impossible, yeah. And I was wondering what implications does such a situation have for education? For education on different things.
I mean, just plain and simple, just the exposure that you get on the different stories in the news. And I know this for a fact, actually. The differences that you get for news stories between, for example, the United States and France is huge. It's huge. Not to quote a certain candidate that is currently running for presidency right now. It's humongous. It's
tremendous.
It's tremendous. The French news has, of course, is a European news source, but it's mostly French focused. So there's a lot of talk about there's a lot of talk about what's happening in France, but a lot of the politics that they talk about are also outside of France, because they talk about the relations that they have with Germany. They talk about the euro. They talk about immigrants. They talk about the current problems that are arising in certain countries in Africa, which they're supporting or not supporting. The United States, you almost hear there's not much in terms of a global scale the information that I get on the French news network is much different than what I get on the American news networks.
So would you say that news networks play a big role in shaping identities of the population,
Oh yeah.
shaping the identities of their viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, depending on depending on what type of news info is coming. Oh yeah, actually no, this is an excellent example. When they talk about mass shootings in the United States, they talk about mass shootings in the United States like, oh, this lone gunman had some mental problems, which in most of these cases it was true, right? It's these troubled individuals had some issues. They got a gun and they let go of their aggression on the people that were closest to them, basically, and also in certain areas. But you hear about these tragic stories, but then you realize that the United States is only one place where this happens. This type of assault happens in other places in the world, maybe not as frequently in terms of the method, but you have bombings in all different parts of the world. You have different accidents and whatnot, and you almost never hear about them because the United States it doesn't bring viewership, right? The United States population, the average citizen, may not necessarily find it interesting because it doesn't apply to them. But if it's somewhere in the United States, then it affects them. And so yeah, absolutely, it changes the way that you look on the world outside. It's like, oh, this was an act of one person that doesn't affect anyone else within the United States, right?
And also with respect to that, to how different media organizations approach different news items, what do you think about censorship? Censorship in whichever shape, form, or version is.
I think censorship is one of those tricky things because on a core level you say no censorship, but then that means no regulation. That means you can pass whatever information you want, and that there's some information that definitely shouldn't be shared to everybody, like nuclear launch codes.
True.
Those are not something that you want to share with everybody. This is a big one. Industry trade secrets is probably the biggest reason why we have cyber warfare today, like the background war that nobody really knows about. It's because, a perfect example of this is I know a guy who actually, he is forbidden because of his job work. They have government contracts that go through their business, and he's not allowed to go to China because cyber warfare is such a big deal that he would not be able to actually do any work there because it would be a risk to the company.
So his work makes him a target for cyber criminals
Exactly. Yes.
So yeah, with respect to hacking or to censorship,
Oh yeah.
I was thinking of the same and just wondering if it can be used for good. It's always discussed in the context of a dictatorial regime coming down hard on its population,
Yeah.
and limiting what they can learn about the outside world.
Yeah.
With North Korea being at the very extreme of censorship, yeah.
No.
And the Western world often being portrayed as the free world, where you have access to all kinds of information,
Which is
in theory, of course.
In theory.
Yeah. And I was wondering, perhaps it can be used for good. So this is an outlandish idea. If you can censor stuff and brainwash people for the better, and convince them that they are indeed as great as Americans have been convinced that they are, the greatest country in the world. If you can if you can, that goes back to the issue of formal education as well, where information is put together with a particular goal, with a particular aim. And is there a way of limiting education or narrowing education narrowing these platforms so that people can have access only for the good,
Right.
and I say the good in quotes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's difficult because it, and sense here and censorship is also funny because it brings up the question of military information, right? But let's see if I can drag this back to education stuff. Educational censorship, right? Is there certain things that we should or should not be teaching our kids in school?
Yeah, for example.
I mean, like, should we be teaching sexual education in school? Is that something that should be taught in school, or is that something that they learn on their own, or is that something that the parents teach? It's or if we were to bring it back to heritage, it's like what information do we give our kids, or give academic people in terms of teaching about certain ideas on heritage and culture? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure. Actually, an excellent example of something that's not censored is, if I'm correct, many Germans, when they're still going through their schooling in primary and secondary education, they take a lot of field trips to a lot of the World War II memorials and locations that were, I don't know, like Auschwitz. Auschwitz is a place which is a common school destination for a field trip, kind of to show the dark side of Germany. And it's something that is almost repeated to a point where it's like, yes,
it's drilled into them to the point that Germans don't know how to become patriotic without appearing nationalistic.
Exactly, yes.
Some of the biggest challenges I've seen with my German friends. They don't know how to be proud of their country or to fly their flag without someone calling them the
Nazis,
N-word, the N-word being Nazi.
Yeah, the N-word being Nazis, yeah.
And yeah, it's with heritage. It's a bit. Sometimes it's good. It's good to convey the information, but sometimes it's complicated with the issue when it comes to how much information can you really let out.
Yeah, exactly.
And how much. What exactly do you teach people and what do you leave out? Like when you. Because if you put everything on the table, so there's a lot of opportunity for controversy.
Yeah.
Like, say, when you're teaching about the differences between cultures, between European culture, Middle Eastern, Far Eastern culture, African culture, you find that for us it was even a challenge when we were learning it, maybe from the globalization, from
possibly,
intercultural competence, because some of the issues were tricky. Some of the pretext of colonization was to civilize the savages, so to say. And perhaps whoever was pushing for that thought they're doing it for the good,
right?
Because they have learned all these things. They have based their knowledge on scientific thought, and you come back to your founder people who their main form of conveying and storing knowledge is oral tradition, and so those are clearly two very different civilizations.
Yeah.
And how to talk about both of them objectively,
right?
without bringing in any hegemony of this culture being better than this one, is very tricky.
Yeah.
And to this date, it's very complicated. For such issues are still very tricky to address to even in this point in time, a century after colonization took place.
Yeah.
When it started, that is. And how the world works today is still based on many things that happen today are still based on that kind of thought.
Yeah.
On the thoughts that.
I mean, for example, the term third world. Have we talked about that yet?
We didn't talk about it on the record.
No, okay.
Yeah.
So the from what I understand, the term third world came from the Cold War, where there was basically the two worlds, the two different worlds, Russia basically and the U.S. and their allies. Those two worlds, and then everybody else was the third world. And what ended up just by chance, the third world ended up being most of the recently decolonized countries in the world. So the majority of Africa, India, of course, the big one, and then and definitely parts of South America.
The global South.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And as a result, it ended up being that third world became also a term for developing countries, which was also an offhand. Basically, it was used as a power term to basically say here are the two worlds, the first world and the second world. Everybody else is lower than us. I mean, it's like third prize, or almost a lower class citizen. In many respects, I don't agree with how the term third world is used, because I believe that, and this is part of education, right? We're taught about third world countries as being underdeveloped countries that need help. And when you say need help and you're a first world country, then it almost makes you it's like the new age white man's burden.
Yeah.
It's you need to help the developing countries develop.
They have to be in a position of needing constant help.
Right. And that's not necessarily a good thing for both the country that is trying to help and the country that basically should develop on its own.
But that brings me back to how education this time was convoluted. I'd say most African countries ended up, and to this day still have largely convoluted systems of education.
Yeah.
Because they were taught, when we moved after colonialism, we had to come up with our own systems of government and education and everything. But they needed a foundation and a platform for that.
Yeah.
And the foundation was mostly Western thought.
Yeah.
Western subjects that were brought, and there was either science, there's a language side of it, there's a science and a mathematical part of it. And so people get to learn, people get to have all these subjects being taught to them. They get to learn them, but they're learning them because they got education as a package deal.
Right.
Instead of building it from the ground up.
Yeah, which it should, in my honest opinion.
Yeah. Ideally, it should be built from the ground up, but now you end up getting skills which you might get the skills really well.
Yeah.
But they don't help you work with them within your environment. They basically make you
complacent
and compliant for the white man's world.
Yeah.
If I'd put it that way, because those are skills that they had, or the skills that they thought were important, and they brought it here, and perhaps they did them thinking that colonialism is going to become an empire that would never end.
Right. Yeah.
But unfortunately, it ended, and the power, the configuration of power that was there during that time persists to this date.
Right.
To this day,
and I mean, something that I think that you mentioned earlier is that most of the systems and infrastructure in Kenya was built by the British.
Most of the railway infrastructure that we had for the longest time, until I think 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It was built by the British, and we used to take it as something that we're really proud of.
Yeah.
We're really proud of having the railway, and the comparison was with a country like Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Ethiopia is one of the 2 African countries that are not colonized, the other being Liberia. So, back when I was in primary school, college elementary.
It is, something like that.
Yeah. We were being taught about the impacts of colonialism and how we got all of these nice things.
Yeah.
We got formal education, we got our Western Western ideas, a lot of Western ideas.
Yeah.
And the railway was something the teacher was teaching us at the time was really proud of.
Yeah.
That we have this railway line
Hmm.
covering different parts of the country, ending up at the coast.
I wonder why they ended up at the coast, right?
Yeah, and for a long time we used to complain that people complain that the government is we have had three or four presidents. We've had four presidents now. It's the fourth president who decided to extend the railway line.
Yeah.
There was always this talk that no one has ever added an inch to the railway that the Brits left us in 1963
Yeah.
for 50 years later. But I thought about it, and the more I thought about it, I realized the railway goes to the parts of the country that have the most resources,
Hmm.
mostly agricultural,
Hmm.
and it ends up at the coast. So it was meant for exporting, and our economy is basically dependent on exports.
Yeah.
It's a large part of our economy is dependent on taking stuff out of the country.
Yeah.
And not just Kenya, a lot of African countries.
Yeah, it's mostly exports and raw materials, right?
Exports and raw materials, and whatever goes, then you buy the stuff back.
Right.
And that's again because of the education we had.
Right.
We never, there was no education system that was built from the ground up to teach people to work, to develop ideas for their own environment.
Mhm.
People do it. People have ideas. It's not that because of that education, people never came up with ideas. There's a lot of ideas that people have, but there's still that idea of if something is from outside, it's better.
Right.
If something is from the West, it's a good thing, and we need to do it.
Right. So I think to then round up our discussion, our two episode discussion here, is the idea that in many ways education is a way that you can in the classroom or whether it's informal education, formal education, it's a way of almost showing your country's values in many respects.
Mhm.
Where you can you basically you're able to show what's important by teaching the students what is of value to them, right? Whether that be science, whether that be literature, how to work, how to study, what's important, what history do you need to know, and that goes hand in hand with heritage, and in the sense that heritage is in many respects it's a way that you can frame how your value, what you value as a culture, right? What heritage in many respects it's what you inherit, it's what you pass on, and so that you're teaching those values through heritage almost. And then technology in many ways is the conduit that we're able to do that through, and sometimes the actual heritage that we are trying to pass on. I think that's, yeah. I'm also very tired. It is
Yeah.
it is 10:08 at night, and my bedtime's 10:30. Anyway, so unless you have any other comments or anything, I think that should wrap it up.
So yeah, thanks for listening.
Yes, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, or whatever those young kids do these days. Follow us on Twitter. On YouTube, we're hopefully gonna set up the website at some point soon, but we're quite busy. And make sure to fact check us. That's the biggest thing. If we can start a discussion, or even if you want to talk with us, you can send us an email, which is I believe linked below. It'll be linked below. I'll make a point in doing that. And other than that, I think that should be it.
And have a nice week.
Yes, and have a nice rest of the week. Goodbye.
Ciao.